Hello, everybody. Good evening and welcome. I want to welcome folks who are joining us in the room today, as well as the folks who are joining us online. My name is Allison Mativa, and I am the CEO of the Grand Traverse Regional Community Foundation and co-chair of Press Forward Northern Michigan. I want to thank the Traverse Area District Library for hosting us this evening and including Press Forward as part of their 2026 Civics celebration. And a particular thank you to Michelle Howard and the entire team for being strong supporters of the work that Press Forward is doing. Tonight, we're excited to be able to introduce you to Press Forward Northern Michigan, including how we've been able to build on past efforts locally to support local news and information. As Press Forward Northern Michigan, we are a local chapter of a national network working to strengthen local news so communities across the country can stay informed, connected, and engaged. Joining in this broader coalition gave us access to seed funding to begin the work of Press Forward Northern Michigan, as well as a network for learning and sharing. I do want to highlight that our chapter is local. We're focused on working to support availability and access to local news and information across northern lower Michigan. The Community Foundation serves as host and backbone for Press Forward Northern Michigan, and I just want to share a brief context about why Press Forward Northern Michigan aligns with our work at the Community Foundation. We have a vision for a region where every person is connected, supported, and empowered, and where our communities have resources and opportunities for everyone. Of course, this vision is bigger than us and what we can do alone, but it is what we see as possible and what we believe is worth working toward. And at the Community Foundation, we believe and we know that strong local news and strong communities go hand in hand. Reliable news helps us all to stay informed, connected, and engaged. And so for us, Press Forward is a piece of working toward that vision. As Press Forward Northern Michigan co-chair, I'm really privileged to work alongside Elizabeth Jensen, who is a co-chair with me, as well as host committee Peter Payette. You're going to hear from both of them in a moment. But first, I do want to acknowledge the full host committee. We have a strong group of local leaders who are really committed to advancing the availability and access to local news through catalyzing new ideas, supporting our local newsrooms, and listening deeply to the needs both of journalists and the communities they serve. On the slide, you'll see the full roster of our host committee, and I want to mention in the room, in addition to Elizabeth and myself and Peter, is Nico Pandolfi, if you can raise your hand for those in the room. And I would really, snaps from Peter, I love it, really would encourage you to connect with any of us afterward if you have questions or want to learn more about what we're doing after today's presentation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Peter Payette, who serves as Executive Director of Interlochen Public Radio, and Elizabeth Jensen, who served previously as NPR's public editor and is a 2025-2026 Knight Wallace Great Lakes News Fellow at the University of Michigan, in addition to my co-chair for Press Forward Northern Michigan. So Elizabeth.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. So as Allison said, our roots are homegrown. They date back to 2022, so it's really terrific to finally be at the point where we're able to talk about what we're up to. So we started when a loose coalition of news leaders and the folks at the Community Foundation started getting together to talk about the challenges facing our local news ecosystem. We were seeing the same thing that the communities across the nation are grappling with. The traditional economic model for local news, which is really based on advertisers and subscriptions, by and large just isn't working for all the reasons I'm sure you know. But news outlets are shrinking or closing due to lower revenues. News consumers are increasingly moving over to social media. And it's taken a while for our news outlets to figure out how to adapt to that. Northwestern University labeled the northeastern part of our region a news desert. That rankled some folks in the region. But forget labels. Most of us were around the table when we were talking about this issue back in 2022. Um, we were in the news-based business, and even we really felt underinformed about our communities. And so we were trying to figure out what to do about it. So just to illustrate a bit the challenge that our news providers are up against, this is a map of just 5 of the counties in the Interlochen Public Radio key coverage area. In those 5 counties alone, as you can see, there are 88 units of local government. So 67 townships, 18 villages, 5 counties, and 1 city. That is just a lot of meetings for news outlets to get to, right? In 2023, that didn't show up. Okay, in 2023, thanks to Rotary Charities, sorry. There you go, got it. We surveyed 23 counties and discovered we had lost 25% of our reporters and editors. So that was 50 news outlets, some of them co-owned. We had roughly 115 editorial staffers across the survey area. 3 years earlier, there had been 142 editorial staffers. And now, if we were to do those numbers again today, we probably would say we had lost 30% of our editorial staff across the region. So that bad news, however, is no longer the story. Thanks to some of our work. So while we were expanding our work, the national organization Press Forward was coming together as well, as Allison said. It's a number of major foundations led by Knight and MacArthur came together and they pledged $500 million to support local news nationwide. That seems like a lot of money, but it's nationwide and it's over 5 years. Part of their effort includes setting up local chapters. So in 2024, our informal coalition transitioned to the formal Press Forward Northern Michigan. So as Allison said, that allowed us to access $175,000 in seed money to begin some experiments. We're going to tell you about some of those experiments in a bit, and you'll hear from some of those who are doing the work to keep our communities informed. We also use some of the money to survey residents of our region about what you want when it comes to local news. I hope some of you maybe in the room got the survey and filled it out. Yes? No? No? Okay, well, we will send it out again. With great help from Michelle Howard at TADL. Thank you very much. And her contacts within the Northland Library Cooperative. We asked residents in December and January to tell us what they thought of local media, what we do right, what we could do better, how they want to get their news. Just over 500 people responded, which we were very happy with. And the University of Michigan's Ginsburg Center helped us analyze the data. So tonight we want to share some of our key findings, and we're going to start here. We asked residents if they think they have access to a trusted news source. And you can see there, 23% said yes, definitely. About the same number said no, not really. And then the rest of the people were in the middle. That's good that almost 25% have access to trusted news. It could be a lot better, and it gives us sort of something to work on. We will use this question as a benchmark for our work in coming years. If we are successful, we hope that number will go up. We asked, do you feel well informed about what's happening in your local community? Again, you can see a lot of people are in the middle, but only 15% of the folks surveyed said yes. And another even more said, not so much. That shows that there is work to do. We wanted to understand, so the economic model is changing, as I said. We wanted to understand who pays for local news. 54% do, 46% don't. So that kind of tells you the challenge that our news partners are facing in trying to figure out news costs money to make and produce and report, and it tells you about the challenge that we're up against. We asked which of the following best describes why you don't currently pay for local news. And the segment that really got my attention was 35% in orange said it's not valuable enough. And another almost 16% is too expensive for what you get. So that too is a reflection, I think, of the changing economics at news outlets, which are trying to do more with less, and the news hole is shrinking. So that's also something that we can address. We wanted to understand how the people who pay for news breaks out by the age group. So this is no surprise if you've looked at the national numbers. No one in our 18 to 29 cohort pays for news. So, and the vast majority of people who pay for news are in the older generation. We'd ask them about their reasons for not paying for local news by age group. Also something that will help us understand our work going forward. And then we asked them for their preferred sources for accessing local news. As you can see, it's a digital news website was by far the way folks wanted to get their news. And that's something that some of our legacy outlets in the region sort of need to work on, right? So again, we think this will be valuable information as we go forward. We also asked about social media platforms used for local news. And many, many other questions. And then finally, what we asked was, how has your local media use changed in the last 2 years and why? And so this is just a word cloud of some of the, no local news, unreliable. We didn't do this to sort of, as a negative. We wanted to really understand sort of where folks were coming from, and so how we can sort of change the narrative. So, and then we also, another one of the questions we asked was, what are the topics that you feel are undercovered by your local news outlets, which we hope will help our partners understand where they might be able to focus their attentions. So. There are more findings to come. The Ginsberg Center is conducting a series of focus groups for us this summer to drill down into these issues. I think the first one goes up next week. So put together, we think with the survey data that this is going to give us guidelines on how to invest our money in ways that the communities themselves, that you yourselves are telling us will be most helpful. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to turn it over to Peter Payette, who's going to tell us about Press Forward Northern Michigan's very first experiment, one that's been a terrific success. Peter.
So one of the things the host committee decided out of the gate was we needed to invest in journalism, because there are other things you can do. And as Elizabeth was showing you that we have done, we've done surveying work. We've also gathered journalists together for training and for networking. But we made a commitment to spend press forward dollars on reporting. And I'd say the primary way we've done that has been through collaborative journalism. And the thinking, which you see across the country, everywhere people are thinking about how do we save journalism, is that if we can make 2 + 2 can be 5, then we can have a brighter future than one where we're all just sort of declining in our silos. So we've been kind of building a collaborative network, which means a couple of things. One, it means the work that we have been doing together, we make available to everybody. We want to get these stories published as far and wide as we can. You'll see the nonprofit entities like IPR, WCMU, Bridge, Michigan have probably been the most active, but we've had newspapers involved. The Record Eagle, Cadillac News is represented here tonight. They've been publishing stories. And as well, reporters that file for our collaborative efforts they're paid, and they're told one of the things you may be asked to do is do an interview on the radio. So if you're a newspaper reporter and you write a story that's mainly to be printed or published on the web, then you might go on Morning Edition and talk with Ed Ronco and explain brief the audience on your work. So we're trying to get work out as far and wide as we can. There was one other excuse me, fun example in the corner there. Ty Schmidt is a school board member in the TCAPS district, and he highlighted a story we got out of MESIC where the school there was basically going no screens for elementary students as a response to the declining literacy rates. And he posted that up. And I think when I talked to him, he had 14,000 impressions. And it was at a time where TCAPS was kind of looking at going the other way and having more tablets and things in the classroom. So it was an interesting example of, hey, here's what our neighbors are doing down the road, brought to you through local reporting. And then the other way it's collaborative is that we're inviting reporters to pitch to us. Some of the reporters, people who work at IPR, who work at the Cadillac News, who already have full-time day jobs, they are pitching stories. We're also providing opportunity, I think, that didn't previously exist for other reporters. Miles McClure on the left is a good example. I think he's new to the area, like in the last year, maybe. And he showed up. We get reporters together every quarter. Oh, it had been at Rarebird. I guess we'll have to find somewhere else to go now. But and so Miles showed up, and he's instantly plugged into a network. I think he came from Chicago, maybe. So it's more like what he would expect. I think prior to the press forward work, it'd be much harder for a writer like that to show up in this community, connect to editors, and start doing meaningful work as quickly as he did. And then the other example is that Jakob Wheeler has been filing with us. I would sort of think of Jakob. He's a member of the host committee. He's kind of taken an alternative path in journalism. He publishes the Glen Arbor Sun, kind of has his hands in a number of things. He's been filing. We've been able to get a larger audience for his work through other entities publishing it. And the first story we did out of the gate, so this was about a year ago, and we were coming up on Memorial Day. And the question was, well, with Doge was carving a path through the federal government, people were asking, well, what's going to happen at Sleeping Bear? Will anyone be working there? And so we paired him with Andrew, who is a reporter at the TV station up in Marquette. And so they did a joint piece about kind of the picture for the national lake shores with the federal cut. So it's a way to bring journalists to provide opportunity for them. I'd say a big success story in this regard is sitting in front row right here, Austin Rohlater. Austin is about a year ago. He had done some work writing for the Interim Review. He was starting to file, maybe had filed one story with IPR. He quickly got into this work and started digging up really interesting stories about local government, some of which you see here. And the strength of this is Austin, by filing, is working with Ed Ronco, who's our news director, and Justin Hinckley, who's here also, who's the Northern Michigan editor for Bridge, Michigan. So, a relatively new reporter comes in and has this kind of oversight, and he's producing amazing work. The photo there is in Banks Township. You may have followed some of his reporting about an effort there to get rid of zoning. So one of the township officials could open a gravel mine on his property, which was precluded by the zoning. And there was so much interest in it, I think in part created by our reporting, that they had to move their township meetings into the gym because the crowds were overflowing. I think the vote was only 3-2 to not eliminate zoning, right? So the margins are really thin on this stuff. And then a final example of collaborative work. This is work no one entity could have done this alone. So this was a real deep dive that we did into the problems in Michigan prisons up in the UP. The vacancy rates and the staff are in excess of 30%. The problems are kind of horrific. Marty Link, who's one of the most experienced investigative reporters working in this market, she's independent. She led the work. WCMU contributed a TV crew, so they did a video piece that went with it. There, other reporters were involved. We have Claire Keenan-Kurgan from IPR was involved in this work. So we were able to take a reporter who's, just a couple years on the job, and she got to work right alongside Marty, and they produced some really excellent stuff. And this reporting continues. I was leaving IPR today, and I saw Claire, and I said, "Oh, what are you working on?" And she said, "The MDOC just announced they're going to raise the pay $5 an hour for corrections officers." So we continue to cover these things that are really important. This is work. There's the capacity of the news industry in the UP couldn't do this work. I mean, no one really down here could do it, but when we banded together, we did some excellent journalism that I think has great value. So those are some of the things that we have done collaboratively. And now Elizabeth is going to come back up and talk about some other more hyper-local efforts that we've been supporting.
Change mics. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. So this spring, we used $50,000 of our national seed money to support existing news outlets in the region. Some 14 news outlets applied for the funding, and we ended up giving out 6 grants, 6 funding. Not supposed to be using the word grants. So the money we allocated is going to help WCMU buy cameras for its staff and its interns, so they can make that transition to digital presentation that audiences are telling us they want in the survey. Another allocation is supporting a collaborative effort by the Glen Arbor Sun and the Betsy Current to train high school and college-age journalists to produce video-based stories about their rural communities, meeting their peers where they turn to find the news. North of us, the new owner of the Elk Rapids News, which is a 2-decade-old weekly, is going to be able to expand her coverage area thanks to Press Forward. And then there's Sable Points Media, which is down in Mason and Oceana counties. They're going to use the money from us to support governmental and educational news coverage. I'm going to let Arlene Sweeting, we have 2 others, representatives are here tonight, so I will let Arlene Sweeting of Woo Woo in Alberta tell you about their work there and how the funds will be put to use. And then she'll be followed by Jim Bauman of the Boyne Citizen. Thank you. Just right here.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to let you know a little bit about Woo Woo Community Radio. So our story began in 2024 in a donated 5th wheel trailer in our backyard. My partner Dave Beaton is here tonight, and we have 20 years of community radio experience starting and running a station in Sarasota, Florida. So when the government opened a window again and we had moved up here, we're like, we should do this. So we did. And because we had that experience and a lot of donated equipment from our old station, we were able to get up and running pretty quick. And emphasizing local is what really makes us relevant. So we are very active in the community. And when we started, you have to bring people back to radio because a lot of people aren't listening to radio anymore. So we do a lot of community events. You can see we're marching in the 4th of July parade. We did a community mural project. We have backyard concerts. So anything we can do to raise awareness of Woo Woo and make people feel like they're part of our community, we do. So we sponsor film series, it's, you name it, we're out there doing. We currently have 35 local programmers, and most of those programmers are doing music shows. But every weekday from 9 to 11 a.m., we have our What's Up With You morning show, a different host every morning. And they're talking about what's going on in our community, giving people, event information, interviewing local people. And so we're starting to build around that. In terms of news, we joined the Capital News Service, the journalism program out of MSU, and we get their reporting that we can use. And we're also part of the Northern Michigan Media Collaborative also, helping to connect our small station to the broader regional reporting resources and partnerships. We also have had a remote intern for the past 2 semesters from Olivet College. So we're looking at developing internships with different universities and colleges that we can get some folks doing some news reporting remotely even for us. We conduct oral history interviews. So the license for Woo Woo is actually held by the Alberta Labor Heritage Center. It's a low power community radio station, so only nonprofits can hold the license for these stations. And that's the organization that we founded too, because we love the history of Alberta. And we are so excited about what you'll see soon right here. We moved out of the trailer. Woo! We closed on a building in downtown Alberta, which is only about this big, in December, and have moved the studio in to this first front of the building where you see the window there. So the studio has been operating there since January of 2026. And you can see this is a little bit of an inside look of that studio now. And let's see, we're very volunteer driven. Everyone's a volunteer. There's no paid staff. And so we have big ambitions, and but we have limited resources. So we're very thankful to get some grant funding. You know, when I first met with Elizabeth a couple of years ago, I said, well, we're not going to do news at this station, Elizabeth. You know, we're going to do things differently here. You know, it's going to be really low key and all volunteers. But, you know, when you live in a community and you don't have the access to information and you don't have the transparency you want in your local government, you want to do something to change that. So we're doing news. We're getting there. We're going to get there. And this grant is going to help us. So we're going to start streaming our local government meetings. We're going to have 4 interns this summer that will learn how to produce news stories and news packages for us. We're going to host monthly conversations with live audiences, with local administrators and elected officials. And we're going to really beef up our website. We have a little bit of elections information there now, but we're really going to put some time and effort and some money into building a resource for people so they'll be able to find information about local candidates and local issues that are going to be on their ballot this August and November. So we're really excited about this, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And I think, we have our grand opening in 2 weeks if you want to come down to Alberta and join us. Party.
Hello, I'm Jim Bauman with the Boyne Citizen. I love the community radio. This reminds me of Northern Exposure. Chris on the radio, the stocking hats and stuff, right? The Boyne Citizen's been going a little over a year and a half. We had about 4 local former journalists, including myself, that had been brainstorming the idea of starting some kind of a community newsletter, news source for probably a year and a half before we actually did it. We decided to do it as a nonprofit. And we had our first issue in September of 2024. And now we have 2,200 subscribers. We've had about 20% of the subscribers actually donate to us, just totally voluntary. It's a free newsletter. We want the numbers, so we made it free, and the reaction in the community was just overwhelming. We thought people would be interested in local news because Charlevoix County was definitely in a news desert, and you know, we used to have a couple of weekly papers, and I think they just bit the dust during the pandemic. The Gannett paper in Petoskey just stopped covering Boyne City, really. I mean, they cover sports, but no governmental coverage hardly at all, unless there's, you know, something drastic going on. So we just started covering, you know, the waterfront, and people loved it. And we were able to, after 1 year, on our first anniversary, we hired a reporter, Annie Doyle Grove, from the Petoskey News Review from the Gannett paper and hired her away from there. We were lucky that she, was not real financial oriented, and I mean, because we do have definitely a small budget, but it's been growing, and just the support from the community has been amazing. Um, the donations are probably 4 times as much as we bring in from advertising. Advertising is almost an afterthought. We do have a couple of ads, 1 or 2 ads every issue, but it's a far smaller portion of the revenue than we thought it would be. We had a big party on our first anniversary, which we had. Oh, sorry. What do I do? Press. There we go. That's me. Well, I was going to wear the same shirt. And here, here's our first anniversary party, and we gave away stickers that said "I'm a Boyne citizen." So for everybody that came, we had about 80 people showed up. It was at our local library. Libraries are great, obviously, and that was the first day that Annie Doyle started working for us. So it was kind of a double whammy where we had our first anniversary and we introduced our new associate editor, and that allowed me to cut back on my hours at least a little bit. So it's been very gratifying. Just the response from the community, and I hope we're a model. We can be a model for someone else. People from Beaver Island contacted me a couple months ago, and they wanted to, do what we're doing. They've been reading our newsletter, and and I still we sent them all of our documents. Take our bylaws and copy them, just use them. And I haven't heard much back from them, but they were hoping to do that sort of thing. I think it is a model that could be copied fairly easily if you had some motivated people. Our big need, like a lot of businesses, is talent. We could use more writers. Our we don't want to call it a grant, or fund for the funding that Press Forward is giving us will go towards, a lot of it will go towards covering townships. You saw that map of all the townships, and we've got 8 or 10 of them in our county that we would love to cover, and that will be a big help to help us to do that. So we appreciate your support, and thank you very much.
Great. Well, I want to thank our presenters again for sharing about their work. We heard about the Northern Michigan Journalism Collaborative, from Woo Woo Community Radio, and from the Boyne Citizen. And they're each have a little different take, right, on how to meet needs in our communities in terms of local news, access to information. And they're all great examples of the ways that Press Forward is aiming to be a spark, be a supporter, come alongside those who are doing the real work in our newsroom, so that we can all benefit from what they're doing. We're going to have a moment, we're going to have an opportunity for questions. So start thinking about what you want to ask. Our presenters are going to come up to the front and be available for questions. Folks that are joining us online can submit them through the chat, and we'll bring those into the room if you have questions. But before we do that, I want to mention a couple of things. There are flyers on the tables just outside of the room. So if you didn't grab one on your way in, please take one on your way out. There's also a sign-up form on those tables. So again, invite you to put your name down on the way out if you didn't do it on the way in, and feel free to opt into our e-news email list if you'd like to stay connected. You can also visit us online at pressforwardnorthernmichigan.org to learn more about what we're working on. And of course, if you'd like to help support this work, that's welcome as well. Charitable donations are accepted through the Community Foundation, and you can give online at the web address on the screen, or if you like QR codes, that's on the screen as well. They mystify me often, but they're pretty handy. So with that, if our presenters want to come to the front here, Peter and Elizabeth and our front row folks here, we'll be happy to take questions, and I'll roam about with the microphone if folks have questions.
This is Austin. I spoke on his behalf earlier.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. I was struck by the graphic that showed that 0% or all 100% of young people get their information through social media. And that prompted me to ask, what are the levels of interest relative to local, regional, national, international news by age range? And how do those match up with what you're trying to do in terms of interest?
We did, yeah, we
I'm
didn't.
not sure I followed the question.
I think you were asking about sort of, are the younger folks as interested in national? Yeah, we didn't ask that specifically because we were really focused on local news.
But I've seen research that shows it has flipped. Older generations put more value in national and international news, and younger generations have local information more at the top of the list of what they're looking for.
And there's been a lot of evidence too that folks and the younger generations are really looking for ways to connect to their communities. So I love sort of seeing the events that you're doing down in Alberta, and that you're getting together at the library gym at the Boyne Citizen. I think there's a lot of there's been a lot of research that folks in the younger generations really just I think they've been so online so much in their lives that they're really saying, no, wait, I want something really more tactile and a way to connect with my communities. So
I think also you hit something right on the head that we're talking about now, because so many people are pretty disgusted by what they see in the national news on a daily basis. And so as local journalists and local news organizations, we have a huge opportunity right now to take some of their attention away from that stuff and put it in the things that matter locally. And so I think that's a huge opportunity going into the future for everybody in this room.
I'm really impressed with what you've done with the Boyne Citizen. So you're starting from scratch. So I'm really curious a little bit about what you had to do, like in terms of finding a website provider, finding an email platform. Can you talk a little bit about what you had to do and what kind of money was needed to make that all happen?
Well, it's pretty low cost, actually. We just use Constant Contact as our distribution vehicle. But we're thinking about upgrading that. The problem with that is it's just one big long scroll, and you have a table of contents at the beginning so people know what all the stories are, and all the surveys we've taken say, well, make that into a link so we can go down to that story, and the software doesn't let us do that. And it would be easier that way. If we want to put a story on social media, you can't just put a link to the newsletter and say, scroll down to the fourth story and it's right there, So that we're going to be probably changing how we do that. But it was Constant Contact is really quite inexpensive. It's like $1,000 a year for all the subscribers that we have. What was the other question? The website? Yeah. My wife just kind of figured it out by going to it just kind of figured it, and it's very crude, basic website. But we've got all our back issues on there, and we've got You know,
So the
top
distribution,
right corner says subscribe for free.
so is the distribution all in an email that clicks to a website, or are people consuming it in an email?
In the email. Although, of course, you know, we do link to things. I mean, we have a standing head that's regional news. That's all links to Bridge and IPR, you know, because, you know, and a lot of the collaborative stories that have been done are, we make sure we link to those. And some of them, like one of them was about this Bergman Center, a center for disabled people in Charlevoix, and Bridge did a great story on that you know, people in our area were all talking about it, and boom, the story just appeared, and we played that up, you know, moved that way up in the newsletter because it was a big deal that a lot of people had been talking about, and it lost its state funding, and it was kind of a tragic story.
I fully understand the attack on local journalism. Radio, for example, 20, 30 years ago, every local radio station had a news department. That doesn't happen anymore. What I'm confused about is, what is your ask today? How do we get back to having real local news?
That's a great
I can jump in. You want to jump?
Peter, you want to take that? Or
Well, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, first of all, make the case for local news, right? So sometimes it can be you take it for granted, and then suddenly the newspaper or the radio station or whatever goes away, and suddenly you're not connected with your community. So one of the things we can do is say, let's understand and highlight that local news is a community. It's just an asset, right? That links your communities together, and we can make that message. The second thing we can do is figure out new models and figure out ways to support those new models. So my feeling is that the business is really moving towards a nonprofit model in many ways. That's complicated, right? So our outlets have been largely you know, public radio accepted, have been for profit. So you have to figure out a way to sort of make that transition. One of the folks that we funded down in Mason and Oceana counties, he had a for-profit news outlet and it wasn't working, and he set up a nonprofit outlet that links up with it. And so he's changing his model as we speak. So I think one of the things we're trying to do is figure out ways that it work. How do people want to get their news? Let's figure out, you know, okay, if they want to get a news out and a digital newsletter, let's figure out a way to send it out to them that way. So.
Yeah, I guess I would say, I mean, I run a nonprofit organization. I'm here to show you we're doing everything we can to sustain quality journalism in this region, and hope that that would be worthy of your support and others. And I think all the organizations represented here would welcome your support.
I'm with radio, and I support what they're talking about, but we're a little different. We don't draw a line between community and media. So for us to survive, we have to have community be the media. And so we teach, like their funding, we're going to teach the local community how to be reporters. And I think that that's where you kind of empower people, and something else happens. Doesn't necessarily become reporter, but they become part of a larger community, and they acquire self-confidence, hope about what's going on, because sometimes these local governments can be pretty dark, as gravel pit or whatever. You know, I'm a trustee on Gilmore Township, and it took me 6 months to go into meetings to figure out what they were talking about. And I'm at the meetings and I get the agendas and I don't know what they're talking about. And so, I mean, it's really important for us, for the media, to cover local governments, because these township governments, particularly, I'm finding, work really pretty fast and pretty efficient because they don't want to be in their meetings more than 20 minutes, you know. I mean, the guy that left the township supervisor position, he was known and everybody understood his rule is 20-minute meetings and we're out of here. Well, you can't follow a 20-minute meeting with the size of the agendas. You don't know what's going on, even if you sit on the board and even if you get the documents. So it's important that the transparency, that the community asks for that transparency and create it. Because of course you go to these township meetings and you walk in and there's nobody in the room. You've been there. There's the township board and the wife of somebody and a reporter. We don't even have reporters in our township meeting. So these meetings and important stuff goes on there and goes quickly. So I think it's important to just, it's important to democracy, the media, but it's important to get the community involved and then they understand, oh, okay, this is going on. What Rumsfeld used to say, right? The known unknowns that we don't know or whatever. Well, there's a lot of unknowns that we know are going on and we need to get that out. And, you know, we're small, low power station, but the word travels because still the fastest way to get the information out is person to person. So we just propagate that. You know, we have 30, I didn't know we had 35 people. You know, I mean, it seems to me like we have 12 people at the station, but we have 35. So it becomes a family and it becomes an engine to itself. And there's no monetary motivation. So the people that are involved for principal reasons usually. You know, that they love their music or they like news or whatever their reasonings is. And it's worked out really great. It takes a while to build. We are so impressed with Northern Michigan. We never thought we'd be at this level, that we'd have a building. We thought we'd be in the trailer for 3 years, but it's changing. I think people want interactions. They want something more. And I think, radio is still 35% of the listening audience in cars is still radio. So, there's a broad audience. And then, of course, streaming.
Jim, do you have an answer to that question? What's our ask?
Well, I think it's to get people interested in local news and keep them interested. But I think the problem that somebody brought up about reaching younger people is that's a big hurdle for us. I think I'm sure most of our readers are 65. So we'd love to find a way to crack that. We have music and entertainment listings. We list whoever's playing at whatever local bars and restaurants in every issue and try to keep up with all that. That's one way we try to do it. But I think just coming up with exciting stories is another way. I mean, Austin's feature that he did on all the townships in Antrim County and the how their audits came out or the ones that didn't do audits and just that sort of thing, just peeking below and you mentioned the same thing with all the townships. That's just begging to be covered, and that's why our request for support here was to cover the local townships. We've got a village, Boyne Falls, of 350 people, but of course it's got Boyne Mountain Resort right in their backyard. And Charlevoix County has had no marijuana stores until now. And then this little village, which needed money to repair their roads and sidewalks, all of a sudden decided to open it up and have 2 marijuana stores in this one little village. So that Charlevoix County finally has some pot stores. And that, and that group that does that did that, I mean, their way that they operate is so it's difficult to follow. Their minutes aren't really online and they don't put your agenda out ahead of time. And it's, they try. I mean, if you call them up and ask them a specific question, they'll they'll try to give you an honest answer, but stuff just happens. And as you say, trying to cover a meeting or watch a meeting like that where everybody knows each other, Jerry will take care of that. Let's ask Ron, he'll go out and take care of that.
And you don't even know the last name of the person
that
they're
junk
talking
car that's out in Sally's yard
Yeah.
and stuff. So
I'm going to bring it back here for a question next. And I've got one here, one in the middle of the room, and then I've got Royce and Nico. Keep me on track for that puzzle. Here you go.
Thank you. I just wanted to give you some history. As we're sitting here in the library with Michelle, I've been here over 55 years. The old library, there was a question when it came up, what should we do? Should we stay there or should we do something different and create a new library? And the citizens thought about it, fought about it. There was a lot of controversy. And they went ahead and they said, let's go into the next century and let's create something different. So this was created, this situation here. And I just want to compliment Michelle and those that work with her and that were before her, because what they have done is brought the community into this facility. And in many different ways, they have reached out and they brought in all sorts of ages, all sorts of reasons, all sorts of clubs, and they've made it a vital part of our community. And I see the same thing happening and the same challenge happening to what we have here tonight in trying to make ourselves relevant to the community, to all age groups. I mean, I am sure there are children in the schools that would be thrilled to put a column in one of the papers or being interviewed by you or something. This is what the challenge is that you have now. And it's great because it's opening all sorts of ideas in your heads as to which direction to go in. And that's the whole thing. It's the reaching out to the community, bringing them into you, you going out to them. That's what the real challenge is going to be, and all the different ways that we can figure that out. So that's the challenge.
Hi, I'm Alice Schumann with the League of Women Voters of Grand Traverse area. And we have what we call the Observer Corps, and we try to recruit members to go and, attend the East Bay Township meeting or the TCAPS meeting. And it's hard to recruit people because they feel like the information doesn't go anywhere. We use it internally to kind of get a sense of like when every township was talking about septic issues, we were like, oh, maybe we should learn more about this. Maybe there's a position or a zoning ordinance we can recommend. But my question is there some way, and I totally understand, like, I'm not going to ask somebody to volunteer to fix my car. And there's a reason why people go to journalism school and get trained in how to do this. But is there some way to train local nonpartisan volunteers to cover some of these townships and report back, with whatever information they're asked to report back in whatever format that could then be used by the local newspaper or the local nonprofit, reporter. So I'm just looking for a way that we could mobilize volunteers to do some of the work that might provide the fodder for whatever reporting or, news stories get done.
I love that observer program that you have. We got our county commission reporter from the League of Women Voters of Charlevoix County, Charlevoix and Emma County, I think it is. And she turned into a really good, and she observes more than one. She did our city commission and the county board. And we said, well, you're going to the county board. How about writing some stories? And, it took very little training and helping her to turn her into a good reporter. And I've asked her to try and, find other people from that are in that same situation. And I would encourage you to expand that program or do some outreach to offer that service, because I think it's pretty cool.
There are a number of programs, a number of cities nationwide that are doing this. It's called a Documenters program. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It tends to work better in bigger cities like Detroit, where you have just more people, frankly, to do the work. And then I think in Detroit, they hire an actual managing editor who takes all those reports. Justin's nodding, so they take all the reports and then figure out a way to get them to the news outlets to fact check them, get them to the news outlets, and that can be used. We have talked, some of us have talked about doing something like that up here. I would love to explore it more with you. The challenge, I think, would be finding enough people, and finding someone at one of the news outlets that would have the capacity to be able to work with that raw data. But yeah, let's talk.
Okay, so it is happening here to some extent. A lot of my stories that I come up with come from grassroots citizens attending meetings and then telling me the information. Some of them are writing things on Facebook, breaking down what the meeting is. But there's a couple of things that happen in this scenario. The places that have solid grassroots community members that are reporting whatever happens at these meetings, there is stuff that's happened at those meetings that has drastically affected their lives and drawn a wedge in the community. And those are the types of scenarios that get people to actually go to the meetings and pay closer attention. But then the inverse of that is also true. There are people that go to these meetings and they report out what happens there, but they're immediately ostracized by the community. I mean, these are small towns we're talking about. There's 500, 1,000, 2,000 people. So if you're going to be the person that's going to go to these meetings and tell the local newspaper or radio station what's going on at those meetings, you're not going to be a friendly member of that community anymore. But in places where things happen at those meetings that affect people's lives for the negative, there is a community of people that are against them. I mean, Banks Township, there's people that go to every single meeting. They videotape everything that happens there. They'll transcribe it for you. They'll tell you when things happen so that you can cue in on them. But there's an entire group of people in Banks Township that are against what's happening there, and there's a group of people that are. And so it's a small community political environment that people are wrestling with. And it's going to be pretty hard to get people to just volunteer themselves to go in there and basically tell on the members of the board in their community.
Well, I'm Royce Ragland. I live in Elk Rapids, and I do a lot of volunteering, and I was forever on the Planning Commission. So, Mr. Boyne City, I want to address your concerns too about how it is that people go to township meetings and village meetings, and they try to make a point. And most people are not very brisk at it. And everybody wants a comment. And so then you read a summary of the Planning Commission meeting, and it's in the paper. And people are required to pretty much stick to quotes, so they aren't looking biased. But I think that if small town newspapers could find a way, or maybe find a person, maybe someone more in the vein of an ombudsman, but someone who could be balanced and just say, these are the three factors that we're looking at. And these are the three factors that the opposition is looking at. I think that would be so helpful. And I think that if you could find a way to do that, that was not so inflammatory, or that could tone it down a little bit, because that gets so discouraging. And in the Elk Rapids News, we have letters to the editor. And sometimes you look and you see that name. Oh, well, I know what that's going to be, But I think that's a big challenge. I think people love to read intelligent stuff. We love to come away feeling a little smarter. So I think that's a challenge, and it is so hard to find volunteers. I mean, if you want to become both a hated and a loved person, serve on the Planning Commission, because you take abuse for years and years. But still, I think it's a challenge that's out there, and it's kind of exciting if you could find a way to address that, or at least make little inroads. So.
Well, we made a big point when we started the Boyne Citizen that we were going to really try to be fair and balanced, pardon the expression. And we get, I think we've done a pretty good job of that. When people send us donations or we have surveys, or they just email us after stuff comes out, and they appreciate that we're printing just the facts. We have no letters to the editor. We have no opinions, no opinion columns at all. That's all over social media, and there's plenty of outlets for that sort of thing. But we really try to keep it on the straight and narrow, which I think most, I'm sure IPR and most of these papers that we're talking about that the Press Forward is supporting does do that. Bridge does a great job of really, really presenting just the facts and trying to be fair. And so it's a challenge, but I think it can be done. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Nico Pandolfi. I'm on the host committee, and I wanted to return to the question about the ask because I think it's really important, and maybe speak to it from kind of a host committee perspective. And really, I think the answer is that the ask might be different in every community, and that's kind of what we see even in the funding round that we heard about today. Different models responding to the same, economic and cultural, sociocultural headwinds, right? But in very different ways that are site specific, that are place based. And I think these efforts can learn from one another. But we're in a position, and I think the ask from the host committee is to say, can we find a way to mobilize resources to empower the folks who are in their communities, who are pushing for what the answers are, in a way that is collective and in a way where all these efforts are aware of each other and connected to one another and learning from each other, because the challenges are stark. And so for me, part of the answer to that is that the ask may be different in different places. And so rather than say, these two things are the solution to the problems that we face across the board, putting out a request for proposals like this was a chance to say, what are the pinch points that people are facing? Where do they overlap? Where are they different? What works in this community? What can, community B learn from community A, but how might it have to be tailored or tweaked or adapted in a different way? And so I think that's really, at least from my perspective, that's one of the things that's been energizing and mobilizing for me.
I can't seem to let go of the idea of what the fifth wheel, which I think is a little unwieldy. But the extreme of going from the fifth wheel, which would be out in the community, to a building, I would just encourage you to look at something also mobile there that goes to the places where the people are, something between an iPhone and a fifth wheel. And don't lose that, because it fascinates me. And I think there's something there, but I haven't put it together yet.
You all have set yourselves an important and challenging task. Let's assume we're in this same room 5 years, 10 years from now, and you're talking about the progress that has been made. Would you measure it in the number of outlets, the number of readers, viewers, financial success? How would you measure success going forward?
One of the ways is we did have that question that we asked at the very beginning of the survey of, do you have access to a trusted news source? I would certainly hope that number would go up. That we did break down those numbers. I didn't show them, but by zip code, so we know where people feel like they have access and where they don't across our region. So I would certainly hope that we would see some of those numbers change. Again, it's about community, and I think as Nico said, and as we've said here, every community is different. But I would hope that we would have a sense that the communities feel that they are getting what they need and that they are finding valued community news and information to make their communities function well, right? It's a little hard to get at. It's a little nebulous, right? I don't know that I would measure it as money. I do think it'll take money to get there. But I don't know that money is necessarily the rubric that I would use.
One way I think I would measure it is a more informed, engaged citizenry. In the village of Alberta, we have a very important project coming up. Some of you may be familiar that the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy bought 35 acres of waterfront down there, and 9 acres of it has been turned back over to the community for redevelopment. And that process hasn't really started yet, but it will start. And it's supposed to be community driven, but they had their initial meeting back in November and we haven't heard from them since. So we're kind of like a little worried about this community driven part, right? So, yeah, and what Dave said about showing up to meetings and people not being there. And the people in those elected positions not responding when people do show up. People show up to those meetings and they ask questions and they get no answers. And so for me, it's hoping to change that dynamic and get more people in the room and get more people participating in local government. And I'm hoping that we can have an impact there.
I think a metric that is a little bit more nebulous, but I think very important is the conversation around local journalism. I'm pretty new to this, and just recently I've gotten to go to these meetings in conferences where we sit around and talk about the state of journalism, and so much of it involves like resuscitating this old beast, or like, bucketing water out of the ship that's sinking, and that's just not really, I don't really believe that is the conversation that we should be having. I mean, this news environment is in a completely different place than it's ever been in the last 10 years. And so there's so many opportunities for local news to make inroads into people's everyday lives. And so in 5 years or 10 years, I'm really hoping that a metric we can see is that when journalists and newsmakers get together, we're not groveling about how all of this is crashing down, and we're talking about how we're going to build it back up again so we can save this country. That's where I'm at.
Sorry. We do have one question from those of us who are joining online. First of all, they say thank you to all of you to being here, the panelists, for your time, and for the host committee, and for everyone's expertise and energy that they're putting into this. So the question is, what have you learned from those of us in the audience tonight?
Well, I learned I need a 5-year plan. Where I'm going to be in 5 years. I didn't plan this.
I think the question about the ask it was right on the money, because we're so often just talking ourselves into a hurricane. We're like, what are we actually going to do about it? What is this going to look like tomorrow and the next day and the next day? That was a great question. I learned to think a little bit more practically right there, I think.
Yeah, I guess the thing I learned the most was from Dave, and that the lack of a distinction between the media and the community. I mean, IPR has certainly dabbled in community media. Austin came to us through that side door of our Red Pine Radio program, but that was a new way to think about it. That there is no line. So that's the thing I learned.
And I learned that we have a beautiful June evening here in northern Michigan. It's hard to get people into a room, and yet here you all are. So yeah, I learned that we have people in our community who are interested in this and willing to take time out to come talk to us about it. So thank you.
Yeah, on that, the last time we did an event like this, it was in December, which maybe was a better choice. And we did a morning session with the journalists, and then, or no, the morning was with the community, and then the afternoon was with the journalists. And a great moment in that was when Nate Payne, who used to be the managing editor at the Record Eagle, told the journalists in the afternoon that there had actually been more people in the room that morning than there were the professionals in the afternoon, and it was really encouraging. So we have appreciated the community support that we've had for the Press Forward work.
to do a follow-up on the what you're asked. I feel really unfulfilled by the response. It seems to me in this period of fake news, and some of you have kind of addressed this, that real news, real journalism, and the survey certainly shows it, is worth paying for. To me, that should be the answer of all of you, is real journalism is worth paying for. Whether it's small town, local, or larger community, or in a major city. We haven't made that case, whether it is the 18-year-old or the 65-year-old. Any thoughts?
Well, is that an ask? Isn't that an ask of us to do real journalism, or are you saying we're doing it and we're not selling it?
That it's worth paying for.
Okay.
I agree with that.
The dilemma with that. The dilemma with that is that's the Harley Davidson problem. The people who will pay for news are dying. They're the ones who see the value in news, right? So we have to convince people that there is value in that. On the other hand, if you looked at the survey and saw the young people who don't see any value in that, they're not interested in journalism. Sorry. They want to know something that makes them feel good. Now, if their internet goes down, they're interested in getting a fix, right? But they don't care what's going on in the county commission meeting. They don't. They don't care about the things that I started as a radio journalist back in 1980, 79, sorry. And I was the only local source for news in our entire county. And I covered all the county commission meetings. I covered all the school board meetings. I covered all the city council meetings. I went out at 3 a.m. when there was a fatal car crash. I did all the house fires. I did all that stuff. And you know how much of that is valued right now? 0. With young people. With us, there's value in that. But with young people, there really isn't. They want to know what makes them feel good, or what agrees with what their worldview is. And I hate to say that, but that is in fact what's going on. And I think the survey shows that. So we have to find a way to engage them so that they understand the value in journalism. And I love community journalism. I love people involved in the community. A trained journalist is very different from a community member going to a county commission meeting and reporting on what actually happens. The fact reporting, the transcript reporting, the vote recording. That's all fine. That's not journalism. That's transcribing. That's court reporting. And I get that. And there's value in having that. But we have to solve the dilemma of why we have young people who do not value knowing that by a vote of 3-2, you could have had a gravel pit next door, right? Or what's the rollout with rural internet? You know, that's something that they are directly involved in, right? They would be interested in that. But we have to find topics and find things that are of interest to how they feel and how they are interacting with the community. And in many ways, they are not.
So I would argue that some of that has been ever since I've been in the news business, it's been an issue. We used to say people don't pay attention to the news until they start paying taxes, right? So, and when is that? When you buy your house, you're 30, whatever.
Not anymore.
What? Not anymore,
No,
right?
you're 45.
Okay. I guess the way I think of it is that the model has changed such that it used to be if you wanted to get the news, you had to pay for it. Right now, you don't have to because you have social media. You've got AI coming in. We haven't even talked about that, but that's going to be a bigger challenge for news outlets where you're just going to get your answer from AI that's not even going to reflect back to the news outlet at all. So for me, it's more about figuring out a way to, I don't know that we can force folks to pay for it. I've been a working journalist as long as you have. I'm thankful that, I was able to make a very good living in it, in the career that I chose, but I don't know that it's going to be a pay model going forward. So I guess I'm trying to figure out a way to say the information and the community connection is still crucial to all of us to tie our communities together. Let's figure out a way, if it has to be a nonprofit model, let's figure out a way to do that. So.
And maybe we got to turn it over to them. Okay, because I think we're facing a dilemma in our house. Our reporter from the University of Olivet, or what's it? Olivet. We invited to move in with us for the summer. Don't see him. He lives upstairs. We have a house. There's no kitchen upstairs. We don't see him. Okay. And
sounds like my son in my basement.
I called my son in DC. He's a lawyer in DC, and he said, "Dad, that's their generation. They live on this." And I thought we'd have noise upstairs. I thought we'd have rock and roll, or if I lived upstairs when I was young, that'd be rock. They wear headphones all the time. I mean, upstairs, going out to the car, headphones all the time, and they're in their world. We've got to break into that world. Now, the other day I took them to lunch, and it was great. I was like, oh, I felt so much better. We have to cross over to that generation. I don't know that it's about charging them for news, but getting them, because these kids want to make their social presence. I mean, they've expressed that to us. So I'm like, okay, well, be a news person or whatever. Carry news. Maybe you don't want to be a news person, but get the information. We have to get them involved. They were both, he brought his girlfriend with him, and they both, my son asked me the kid's age, and he said, well, Dad, they went to high school during COVID. They don't know person-to-person interaction. And I went to lunch and I asked them about that, and they said, yeah, we do everything remote. Zoom, everything. It's all remote, no person-to-person. So we got to break that. And that's another sociological thing that happened with COVID. I think we're going to have a generation of these kids, because he explained to kids in his law office, it's the same problem. You ask them a question, and I just want them to talk to me, and they send you this long email generated by AI. And he's like, no, I want them to think. So it's going to be a challenge coming forward. That's why I say 5-year, maybe we need a 3-year, 2-year plan.
Can I just, a little bit of perspective from the library. Those young adults are out there. They're here. We have several groups. The one that comes to mind off the top of the head, We the People in Truth. They just had a rally on Saturday in town. That is all young adults. That is all college and high school students. They started their own group because they came to Traverse Indivisible's meeting and they didn't connect with that group. That group scared them because there were all of these people who had a certain age and had a certain education and were talking about things that were things they didn't understand. And they said, okay, so we're going to go do our own thing that we understand and in our own way. And they're doing, they meet every week in one of our rooms upstairs, and there are at least a dozen kids in there, 15, 20 sometimes. If you find a cause that they care about, they are going to show up. And that right now, from what I can see, is the environment and the stuff that's going on out there in the United States of America.
And again, we have seen that folks want to connect, right? So this generation that did sort of go through COVID online, they really are in many cases wanting to reconnect with their communities. We had a journalist breakfast last week, and one of the younger journalists was saying that her friends go on social media to find out the events that they want to attend. And then they get into the news that way. They say, oh, that's, the public radio station is telling you about this event. Oh, wait a minute, they're talking about something that's happening in my community. So there are ways in, but it's a different model. It's not like, oh, I'm 25 years old, I have my own home, I'm going to go buy, subscribe to the newspaper. So.
You were a little angry. Can we hear what he has to say? He was mad. One of mine is for everything. Yeah.
You'd like the mic, sir?
So Austin and Peter, so if you didn't get paid, would you continue to do this? And 2, if you didn't get paid, how would you eat?
Oh, I would definitely. I mean, I've been not getting paid for doing the things that I love my entire adult life. So,
So how do you eat? What pays the
well,
bills?
you figure it out. I mean, being poor is a real talent that people can acquire by being poor, and it works really well. And I'm really lucky that to get paid to do this. But I think the work of bringing stories to the people who need to hear them in that affect their lives is too important to not do. So yeah, I'd be here even if I wasn't getting paid.
But you would have to find something to support yourself to continue to doing this, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, that's a good point. I mean, you have to do this less because you have to go do something else for money.
And how would you distribute the information if you didn't have some sort of funding to pay for the network?
I mean, that's the one great thing about why we're here today is because Press Forward is bringing all this money, and it's crazy because I mean, and I mean that is a little bit of the solution. Where the conversation is going to change drastically here pretty soon because a lot of the local media outlets are going to have a lot less pressure from advertisers and from subscribers, and they'll be able to cover a lot more vital news. Whereas before, they're going to be a little worried about what's Johnny that funds our advertising or the local real estate agent's going to think about this. They're not going to have to worry about that as much because there's nonprofit money coming their way. And so we're going to be seeing very soon, and we already have, I mean, all of my reporting has been supported by this. So we're going to see more integrated reporters and communities that are bringing better stories. And so I think it's going to, we're watching the change happen right now, I think.
I'd move over to Benzie County and have a music show on Woo Woo. That's what I would do. But I would need a job. I would need income. I'm wondering what your point is. I'd also like to hear you agreed with the gentleman who says we don't sell our stuff. I wanted to hear you talk about that.
That's my point. If we don't sell ourselves, how are we going to get funding to pay for this? Because it's going to come down to funding. And if we don't get grant dollars, where's the money going to come from? And is there enough grant dollars to fund? I mean, I work at the Cadillac News, and we cover 3.5 counties. We can't cover every township. We don't have enough reporters. And I've worked at the newspaper for 35 years, and there is a solid wall between advertising and news. I've never once had advertising say, what cover this or cover that? Why aren't you doing it? Never had that once. Never was told them not to run something. So I think the model's there. And I do think there's young people that want to have information, but they need to have it explained to them because they're not being taught in school anymore how government works and what their role in government is. So I think we have to do a much, much, much better job of letting people know the value of news. And maybe that's where the funding should go, is promoting local news, because the foundation's there. I mean, there's still a bunch of newspapers, right? There's still a bunch of TV stations. There's still a bunch of radio stations. The foundation's there. So we're giving up on that foundation? It's changing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say.
Are you saying we are giving up on that foundation?
No, I'm asking, is that where we're going? If we're going to go with all citizens journalism, where to cover everything we have to have volunteers? And isn't that a little bit biased? Because most of the people that would cover these meetings already go in there with a bias?
The way I see it is that the folks have voted with their dollars already, are starting to vote. Some people still do support newspapers, and they give generously to public radio and community organizations, and they support the Boyne Citizen when they don't have to, when it's out there for free. But if you look at the economic models, I mean, people are losing subscriptions, and people have voted already. And so, yes, I agree with you. I think one of the roles that we can play is building a support for local media. But I'm not sure that the economic model, it hasn't worked nationwide, right? It's just, you can look at the.
I don't disagree that the economic model is broken.
Right.
I mean, that's not my point. My point is we have this foundation that's already built, but there could be ways that we could be looking at different ways to fund it as well as get support from the public.
think that's what we're trying to do. So, yeah.
Are you the owner of the Cadillac paper?
No.
Okay. Then that's who we need to hear from. Because I mean, you have a model, you're seeing this model, but it's the owner that decides whether it's working or not working for him. You know what I mean? And so the profit system of media is falling apart. I mean, it's pretty clear. There's one, what's our paper in Frankfurt? The Record Patriot. They got one reporter and they print press releases. So, I mean, as long as they can make money with one reporter and print press releases, sell ads, they'll stay. But that's not a newspaper to me. I pick it up and I read everything that I already know because it came across.
Unfortunately, there's been a lot of newspapers and other media companies that have been bought out by larger corporations that are looking only for to make a buck. I think we're the last independent owned daily newspaper in Michigan, and that's probably the biggest problem.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, last call for questions in the room. Anything else online? Okay. Well,
involvement doing what you do. It's incredibly.
Well,
thank
I think
you.
everybody up here does it because they love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, what's really clear to me in this room is that there are invested people in our communities who care about local news, who care about the people doing the work. And so, continuing to be ambassadors for the value of local news, for subscribing if you can subscribe, donating if you can donate, but personally engaging with your local news outlets is a great way that you can all kind of step away today and help move this work forward collaboratively. We will call this the end officially. So for folks on Zoom, thank you for tuning in. Thank you to the folks in the room. We do have the room a little bit longer, so feel free to stay, continue conversations with each other, with our panelists. And a reminder, there's flyers as you exit. Please take one with you, sign up to receive press forward information, and just stay connected. That would be really wonderful. So thank you very much.